is. And we may as well go straight on to Georgian news, because we have a lot to say about that now. Here's just one example of press cartoons giving an impression of what is going to happen now that the Georgian Dream Party, which has its majority in parliament, has managed to pass the foreign agent registration bill. So it has now become an act. President Salome Zurabishvili, who is originally from France, although Georgian by ethnicity, is against it but cannot veto indefinitely. So here we see mop-top Prime Minister Irakli Kobakhidze maliciously diverting the bus of Georgians who apparently with one voice wanted to go to the European Union and sending them to the Kremlin instead. Is this all that can be said about it? Well, no, it's rather more complex than that. Here we see one take from Nick Griffin, formerly the most important British nationalist politician, now quite a following on Telegram, but a divisive figure even within the nationalist scene. But his particular take on this is that every day brings a new blow to the Washington/Wall Street empire. And he points out that Georgia is not the only country wishing to regulate and scrutinize foreign paid persons and organizations by law, because Turkey is doing the same, he says. And he says it's all about reducing the influence of so-called Western, because he thinks they're not really Western, but a financial cabal, liberal non-governmental organizations. If you want the detail on this, and let's just translate this because most of our viewers don't even know what script that is, that's Georgian script. There is a site which will be in the show notes, whose name translates as Illuminate, Gaanate in Georgia, and they have put the very basic bare bones in here. And I think the point here is that this explainer, which is for the non-specialist Georgians who are ranging from clueless to outraged, it's telling them really the bare bones of this law, and what it is devoid of is the scare reporting, which has been featured in other channels. There is no mention in this bare bones analysis, which is being passed around, shall we say, the mainstream pro-Western youth in Georgian society. There's no indication here of people having to be obliged to disclose their sexuality, or individuals being gone after by this law rather than organizations. And that, I think, is significant. So you can read that. You will, when you load it from the show notes, give it a couple of seconds, depending on your device type and browser, for the translation to load into English. Otherwise, you will be disappointed and think that it's just Georgian. But it's not as controversial and outrageous as people think. I hesitate even to mention Reddit as an internet source, but occasionally there are gems there. And in the Reddit subthread, a subreddit called Sakartvelo, the Georgian name for Georgia, earlier this week, somebody, it's the usual caveat, it's an anonymous person calling themselves potential scholar, so a young academic, is giving an explainer on the law on transparency of foreign influence. I cannot vouch for who this is, but they have had the time to go through the contrasts and comparisons between this and the best known existing foreign agents Registration Act, which is the United States original of the genre from 1938, and they've contrasted the two in the following few slides, which I'll not read out in full, but because people can freeze the screen and read the whole lot. But look, this is obviously somebody who is negatively inclined towards the new law, and who would go along with the Western media talking points and the Georgian media talking points and opposition talking points that this is a way of chilling and freezing dissent in Georgia, having a chilling effect. The first of the 5 slides of contrasts says that while the Georgian law broadly targets the NGOs and scattergun approach, FARA applies, because it was enacted on the eve of the Second World War, to agents of foreign principles, and it excludes NGOs, which weren't really such a big deal back in the era of Roosevelt, unless they're acting as agents of a foreign government. Okay, be that as it may, that's the first claim. The second contrast is that while the Georgian law will stifle civil society, it's always such a buzzword in emerging democracies like this, civil society, FARA provides transparency. So to my mind, just giving my own opinion, this is a verging towards just being an apologist for America good, anyone else who tries the same thing bad, because it's taking America's word for it. And people who watched last week will know that Canada is in the process of doing similarly. So has Britain and several continental European countries. But there are differences between all these: Turkey's law, Russia's law, and Georgia's law. But everyone in the geopolitical space really is enacting such a thing now. The third of the 5 contrasts offered by Mr. or Miss Potential Scholar on Reddit is that the Georgian version is equipped with teeth, fines if you don't comply. You can even be criminally prosecuted for failure to tell the Georgian government what they want to know about your organization if it's more than 20% foreign funded. In the US, the Foreign Agents Registration Act can, if infringed, result in the same penalties. But the law is, it says, primarily focused on transparency. This is fluffy language, right? This is not reassuring to me that America's law really is better. This is just, what America does is better because I say so. I don't see any primary sources in here. Fourthly, FARA targets individuals and organizations who are politically active, but Georgia, and we heard this talking point 2 weeks ago from the BBC, as if you watched that episode, you will know that the BBC went for Mr. Samharadze, a governing party MP, on this very point. Allegedly, the Georgian version is indiscriminate and goes for religious and humanitarian and charitable organizations, etc. Well, people can make of that what they do, and let's go on from there. And for the final one, which is that FARA requires registration statements. In other words, you can say to the US government, don't touch me with this law. I'm a bona fide journalist or academic. And Georgia doesn't, allegedly. Now, I don't have the time to go further into the depths of these laws, and I don't want to give legal analysis as if I were qualified to do so. But I do not find much reassurance in this much bandied about term that America really has a better law than Georgia, let alone the other Western countries and Turkey and Russia. Speaking of Russia, OCCRP, a well-known website for those who are interested in corruption in countries, is now reporting that Russia is going further than ever with its original law, the one which prompted the media and the Georgian opposition to call this Georgian law a Russia-style bill, as in the cartoon that you saw at the start of the segment, because Russia is now going to exclude what it regards as foreign agents from participating in elections. You might say high time, actually, but this is enough for people to lose their heads in the West and in the Russian opposition. Politico, which is based in both Brussels and Washington these days, is reporting, and I had an earlier iteration of this last week, that US senators, particularly, I think, some of the more liberally inclined ones, are now going to push for Congress to go beyond the White House in foreign policy and to make sure that the named politicians who are responsible for this act, as it now has become, could be sanctioned. And I mentioned last week, this is some of the expected fallout. The White House spokeswoman, who we often see making outrageous and ill-qualified statements, but not always, has said this time that Karine Jean-Pierre, that this is going to cause a fundamental reassessment of America's relationship with Georgia. That's not the American deep state talking. That's the more liberally minded politicians. We will see how this goes. Just a couple of images to indicate to you this is not representative of the whole protests. I tried to paint that picture last week from witnessing it fairly close up, deliberately not in amongst the protesters, but around the edges. But look at the youth of these people and the bandana wearing and the alternative face and hair. Obviously, people will go for photogenic shots, and they shouldn't take this as being all of those who are protesting. But there's a very strong teenage vibe, and it gets a bit more otherworldly than that, because here we have a young lady of perhaps 15 holding up a bilingual sign, English and Georgian, based on the Harry Potter lore or mythological universe. So expecto patronum, well, actually Latin, not English. I'm waiting for the remedy. And then in Georgian, dementorebo, so you dementors. So anyone she doesn't like in politics, or she's been induced not to like, is a dementor, one of the top categories of villain from Harry Potter. That wasn't a one-off. Here we have some gentlemen who look a bit older, enough to know better, and one young lady carrying 2 mugshots each, one of a Georgian government politician and alongside it a Harry Potter character. So it's getting a bit facile, juvenile, jejune, whatever you wish to call it. Just to end this segment, people, of course, don't speak Georgian. I think 99% of them who watch this news. So I will not put the video in. We don't have permission anyway. But there is an interesting rapper who goes by the name of Masteri, or the Master, who has got a huge number of views for a small country like Georgia for this rap from just before the protests began a couple of weeks ago, when the mood was hotting up. The rap is called Chemi, droshaa, which is idiomatically translated, I now reclaim the flag. And I'll just read my gist of what he was saying in that rap, because I think he represents the thinking part of the middle part of Georgian society that is neither very enamored of the governing Georgian Dream Party nor a fanatic of the EU. And it paints the scene for what's happening in many such countries on the eve of the real tensions beginning. So the rapper Masteri says, I posted the Georgian flag and the liberal pseudo-patriots called me a Russian stooge. Who can fail to see through them? It's my flag now. I don't give a stuff what footballers and pundits and fashion models yell about being a Russian stooge. I was brought up with basic decency in the 90s. I mentioned Christ and you made me out to be a Putin fanboy. Your democracy is double standards. Who is afraid of the cross, which of course is on the Georgian flag? There's a lot of anti-Christian sentiment among these young protesters. The rapper goes on, I tell you that the bankers are playing us. Play a dirty spook game, get called a loser. This lot, meaning the extreme agitators, cannot stand anything that's truly Georgian. Their facade is as fake as their sloganeering. We see you running around with all those NGOs on your CV. You can't make a single point without swearing. Music is all I have. I am asked to go to and live in Russia, and I'm being told that I'll be a social media whore. I'm a European, but I'm now reclaiming this flag. Obviously, that's one guy's attitude, but I think it shows that a lot of Georgian society is now thoroughly fed up of the extreme tensions that have been brought into Georgian society here.
Alex, thank you very much for that excellent report and insight into what's been happening on the ground. Amazing things happening all around the world. We need to be very careful in analysis. Politico was of interest to me, as our viewers and listeners will see when I get on to my own segment in the news.